So what you're looking at right here is the brand new Samsung Galaxy Book Pro. That's it, just the Pro, not the Pro 360, just the Pro. And besides the hinge, there actually are quite a few other differences. And if I were to decide between these two laptops, I would probably actually recommend the Pro to most people. And so I'll explain why later on in the video, but in this video, of course, we're gonna dive into a full tour and a full test of this laptop to help you decide if it's the right one for you. And so, of course, we'll be testing out the speakers, the microphone, the hinge. We'll talk about the physical design as well as the software, because if you saw in Samsung's launch, that's one of the big selling points in their new Galaxy Books. Everything coming out this year, they're really talking about the software on there, the integration with your phone, and of course, we'll cover that in a second. But let's start off with the physical design of this laptop. I mean, the first and most obvious thing is just how incredibly small it is. It's really, really thin and light. This is the 13.3-inch model, and honestly, if I were to recommend one to anybody really, I would be recommending the 15-inch. I'll explain why in a second. But the 13-inch is just so incredibly small. I love the size and the portability of this laptop. And looking at the sides, they actually packed quite a few ports into this. Unlike the Galaxy Book Pro 360, which only has 3 USB Type-C ports and then a headphone jack, this one on the left side has HDMI, which as you can see is almost the entire thickness of the keyboard. So very impressive they crammed that in there. We have 2 USB Type-C ports. One of them is actually a Thunderbolt. Again, I love to see that on here. And on the other side, there's even more ports. They have a USB Type-A, we have a headphone jack, and we have a micro SD card slot. So honestly, you're able to charge through USB Type-C on here. I love the duality of that. And you're still getting pretty much every port I would want to use. Of course, if there's not a port you're looking for, if you want another HDMI or something, you could easily use the Thunderbolt or the other USB Type-C to plug in another display that way. So with that being said, I mean, the ports on this, I was very happy. The next thing to note is actually the material of it. So, I mean, comparing them side by side, this is not really a comparison video, but you'll notice that the Galaxy Pro 360 feels a little bit more premium and also feels a little bit heavier as well, a little bit more of a metallic design, while this one generally incorporates a little bit more plastic in it. Specifically, you'll see there's a little bit more flex in it, but honestly, all things considered, I'm not especially disappointed in the design. But I think that really what they're doing with this laptop, it kind of seems like Samsung is trying to directly compete with the MacBook Air. Very thin, very light, and you still have a really powerful processor on board and a ton of storage, and overall a really nice travel experience. The next thing I want to talk about is actually the hinge on this laptop. This is one of the main differences between the Galaxy Book Pro and the Pro 360, as the name obviously suggests. And in many ways, I think that this one is actually an advantage. Although you have fewer features, you can't flip it back to a tablet, you can't use it as a touchscreen, you don't have an S Pen, but all things considered, in the most common use case, for most people, most of the time, this is going to be better, and I'll explain why in a second. The first thing is that when you open up this laptop, so if we just do a quick little one-handed hinge test, you'll notice that it's very easy to open, it's perfect stiffness there really, and the benefit of this over the 360 hinge is actually that it doesn't wobble. So if you move your table around, you're talking with your hands, you're typing hard, the display really doesn't wobble at all. And that's something that we did see on the Galaxy Book Pro 360. That did have quite a bit of wobble. So that's an advantage of this hinge style. Another advantage of this one is actually the display. Now, the display on here is really similar to the Galaxy Book Pro 360. You're looking at a 1080p display. I wish it was higher resolution, yes, but this one actually, although it's not a touchscreen, is a much more matte display, which means that you have a little bit more anti-glare, and even though it's not the brightest out there, you have fantastic colors, and you really don't need to be much brighter than this when you don't have a glare. So I find that most of the reason that I wish the Galaxy Book Pro 360 was brighter is when I'm in a bright environment and there's some glare. But once you kind of eliminate that glare, or at least mitigate it as much as this one's doing, I found that this one handles much better in bright light. The display here is still using Samsung Super AMOLED, which means that you are getting really nice dark blacks, really good contrast, and overall fantastic color. So the display quality, although I wish it was slightly higher resolution, I am really happy with this. And talking about the keyboard a little bit more, I found that the keyboard, again, you have a pretty much plastic body here, so you are going to notice some flex throughout the entire keyboard, especially on something so thin like this. But the overall keys, there's a decent travel to them. They feel all right. They don't feel like the most premium laptop out there, but they get the job done. And the big advantage of this keyboard is actually across the top. So we have some really good functional buttons here. Of course, the same brightness and volume and stuff like that. but Samsung incorporated a few extra buttons here. One of them is to change the performance mode, if you want to call it that, of the laptop. You can turn the fan off to an optimized mode. You can turn it up to a performance mode. Another button is actually to turn off the camera and the microphone as well. We'll get into a camera test in a second, but turning it off is a nice security feature that you can have on here. And then of course in the top right, we have that fingerprint sensor. It's quick, it's responsive, but I don't like it. I would much rather have Face ID on a laptop. It's just easier when you open it, signs in immediately instead of fingerprint sensor. But regardless, they wanted you to have those really nice thin bezels all the way around the laptop. And I do appreciate those bezels. Having a thin bezel all the way around, pretty much symmetric too, it looks good. I think it's a really, really good design there. Okay, so with that being said, let's get into a webcam test. All right, guys, so this is a webcam test. This is what it looks and sounds like. It's limited to 720p. Honestly, very disappointing for a laptop that has the name Pro in it. Also, it does give you some interesting features on the bottom. So it's like a beauty mode is on right now. This is when it's off. It really doesn't look different to me at all. But we can go into like clean mode or beautiful mode, which makes me look really, really strange. But essentially, this is what it looks like. I don't think it's the best out there for the price. Like, I think at this price point and at this like pro level laptop, I wish there was a better camera on here. Now we can also take a look at the Geekbench scores right here. So OpenCL score performed reasonably well. And then of course the single and multi-core scores look really on par, pretty much what we were seeing with the Galaxy Pro 360, which is honestly pretty good. Okay, so now let's get into a speaker test. Okay, so let's do a quick speaker test at full volume. So as you might have noticed there, this laptop has speakers. It has speakers, and that's pretty much all I can say about that. They're far from good. They're not loud at all, and it's hard to hear even like anything I'm listening to on here. But I mean, all things considered, that's one of the compromises you make to have a razor thin and ultralight laptop like this. You're not going to have big speakers. The speakers are located on the bottom. You can see them right there. And so in a lot of situations, especially if it's sitting on your lap or anywhere with a softer surface, they are going to be more muffled, even more muffled than they are already. So speakers are definitely not a strength of this laptop. But Samsung's giving you some pretty good software to very easily connect with your Galaxy Buds or any other headphones you want. And that kind of segues us into the topic of software, which is really one of the big strengths of this laptop. If you go to the start menu on this laptop, you can scroll down and see a lot of different apps that come pre-installed on here. Some people might not like this because you might not use all of these. You could always just remove them if you wanted to. But honestly, they have some really great stuff out here. So from link sharing, which is a great way to really send large files back and forth to people without needing to upload it to Google Drive or something like that. We also have live message, live wallpaper, which is actually really cool. Your wallpaper literally changes on your laptop. And of course, we can go down to the Samsung category here, and there's a ton of stuff from Samsung Flow to Samsung Dex. We've got smart things to control your smart home on here. We've got Samsung Security, Samsung Settings, and actually Settings has a little quick option on the bottom right corner where you can open that, and it's going to allow you to like change the fan and the keyboard brightness and all types of things like that. And all of this syncs up really well with the Samsung ecosystem. So if you have a Samsung Smart Tag or a Samsung phone, everything is going to work really well together with this laptop. So in the Samsung ecosystem, like this is really a good introduction for Windows syncing up better with your phone, which was really the emphasis when they released this laptop. And I think that's kind of interesting because it's a different approach from the old Samsung. Samsung for a long time was a really hardware company that had software on there. So if you think back, like One UI 3.0 on their phones and newer, it is good. It's a lot better now than it used to be. But if you think back to like TouchWiz and the older launchers Samsung used to have, they were really a hardware company. They were great because they had really good camera sensors, really good phone design, but the software would usually lag a little bit. And now here is kind of a different example. Like, yes, it's a thin, light laptop, but the physical design of this feels like they spent less money on it. They were trying to make it more affordable. It's a plastic design. It doesn't have a great camera. It doesn't have great speakers. But the software is where you really pull ahead here. Now, the combination of a really good processor and good software should be giving a lot of people a great experience, which is why I was saying before that I would really be recommending this laptop over the 360 for most people. You're saving money. I really don't need the touchscreen anyway. Like I could do without it if it meant I'd saved a lot of money and I didn't have that glare on the screen. And in general, it's definitely going to get the job done. But one last thing I want to mention, something I said in the beginning of this video, and that is if you're looking to buy the Galaxy Book Pro, I would highly recommend getting the 15-inch model instead of the 13-inch model. And the reason for that is because you're going to have 16 gigabytes of RAM on the 15-inch model, and the 13, for some reason, they only allow 8 gigabytes of RAM. So you can get an i5 or an i7 processor, but only 8 gigabytes of RAM. So anybody looking to be more of a power user, if you're trying to use this laptop for 3D modeling or just running a lot of software, editing videos, you really need to have that 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is why I would be recommending the 15-inch model. And when you're looking at the 15-inch model, all things considered, the price of it, the processor, the RAM, the screen quality, everything combined, it really is, it's a pretty good laptop at a pretty good deal. And so I think it's a pretty easy laptop to recommend for any students out there, anyone traveling, and anybody who really thinks they're going to be pushing their laptop and they really want a good processor and a good integration with their phone and this ecosystem. So overall, guys, that's what I have to say about the Samsung Galaxy Book Pro. If you guys have any comments about that, obviously leave them below. I want to hear your opinions on this laptop. As always, I'm Mike O'Brien. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.